Rémy, thank you so much for making time to be on the show today.
Nah, it's a pleasure to be here, Nathan. Since we met at the festival,
Yeah,
you reached out, checked out some of what you do.
yeah,
So it's a pleasure to be speaking to another young Namibian about, you know, interesting conversations.
yeah, no, definitely. I want to start off with questions about you first.
Yeah.
But firstly, I think before I ask the first question, I want to preface by saying that your journey seems to be quite diverse,
Mhm.
because you're an author, you're an editor, you're
Yeah.
a publisher, you're creative, you're an entrepreneur, just to mention. I was going through the whole list,
Yeah,
just
yeah.
quite a few things. And it's just, but you see, most of them seems to be focused in the literature and arts space. What initially sparked your interest in that space?
Literature is always something that I've always wanted to be involved in since I was in primary school, since I was learning English, since I could write, since I learned how to write and figured out how to tell stories. I think literature has always been a field that's provided me with a sense of belonging in the world. When you're a reader, you quickly find out that you don't belong to one space, you belong to many, that you're not just one thing, you're actually many things.
Yeah.
I always wanted to be a writer, so I figured out how to do that from Windhoek, from Namibia. I've always wanted to write a book that was published internationally, so the good graces were kind to me and that happened. I've always wanted to be in a space where I can promote the work of peers, and thankfully I have found the right kind of colleagues to help me start the kind of organization that does that. I've always enjoyed literary festivals since I started attending them in university, so I'm glad to be able to host one. I've always enjoyed everything that involves writing, and so to be able to participate in that field is I think for me a godsend, because it's not a field that many people get to be involved in in Namibia. There are other more promising, more lucrative industries, more financially remunerative industries to be involved in, and literature is hard, but I think it's important, and one of the reasons I enjoy it is because of the community. And literature is just a base. It's a place in which I felt comfortable, like I felt confident about it. But all of the work that I do involves some sort of community. So even with the gym that I started, that's about building a community of people who are trying to reach their goals. The salsa club that I once used to own was all about building a community of people who liked this dance that I was so passionate about. Everything that I've ever been involved in has always involved community. So I think literature is just an aspect of that desire to be part of a community.
Yeah.
And I've just always gravitated towards things that are not necessarily niche, but they're very particular about who they're serving. So literature is not, it's very broad, but it's also at the same time very specific. We're targeting a particular kind of reader who's interested in certain books and not others, or who has a preference for a certain type of book. Salsa, our dance studio, we offered 4 types of dances, but the majority was salsa, bachata, cha-cha, and merengue. So if you like those 4, or you're interested in learning those 4, you have a way in. But if you're interested in, let's say, tango, which is like a distant cousin, or kizomba, which is also a close cousin, then we're not necessarily for you. The Forge, the gym, is also about people who want a safe, supportive space in which they can pursue their goals. So we're not like a general walk-in, drop-in kind of gym. We're more boutique. We focus on our clients' needs and types of that. So it all involves community of some sort, right? But literature isn't a full community. Salsa isn't a full community. The gym isn't, fitness isn't a full community. So all of these things I think are trying to answer one universal question about what community or tribe you belong to, and then being lucky enough to find opportunities that let me explore them. Yeah.
Nice. It's a little bit of a strange sort of mix of personalities that you have, because mostly writers would be, by themselves, a little bit introverted. And I think I've seen it's with writers, they would focus more on the writing, and when it comes to the publishing side of things, it becomes a little bit difficult for them.
Yeah.
But it seems as though you are sort of like an entrepreneur by nature, and still you have this, you can still balance it with the passion of actually locking yourself out and focusing on the
I don't know whether I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I know I'm impatient by nature. So I know when circumstances aren't right, when I don't have the things that I feel I want in order to do a particular thing, it builds and builds to a point of frustration where it then boils over and like, well, what are you going to do about this?
I see.
This thing doesn't exist. So are you going to live without it, or are you going to try and get to it? Not necessarily create it, because sometimes that's impossible, but are you going to do something about this thing that's really frustrating you to the point where it's an unbearable anger? And so maybe entrepreneurship has been a lucky way of dealing with that, but it's just the absence causes frustration. The frustration causes the search for a solution, and then maybe that solution works for a while, and that's maybe what we call entrepreneurship. But I don't certainly wake up in the morning and think, let me start a business. Let me think about these numbers. Let me think about labor. Let me think about location. Let me think about product distribution. I don't think about my life in that way, as maybe perhaps most people would identify as entrepreneurs. I'm just a guy who got pissed off at a set number of things and tried to do something about them. And it's hard, but I think that's how I gravitate towards challenges. If I see a problem that I am a part of, or that I feel compelled to solve, then I will try my best to do that and see where it winds up or where it leads. But writers, as you said, can be introverted, and you have to be in order to think about what you're writing, why you're writing it, how you're writing it, where you're writing it, when you're writing it. All of these are very important questions that writers must ask themselves. And so it's maybe not even introverted, it's more just the need for silence around you, to focus on these great, complex, messy answers that you're trying to deal with in your work. And I'm specifically saying I'm dealing with them from literature, which is itself a particular kind of writing. But there's no writer that can avoid being a part of their world or being a part of a community. Once you get your manuscript completed, you're going to have to work with an editor. You're going to have to learn how to do that. You're going to be part of a publishing stable with other writers. You're going to have to figure out how to be a part of that. You're going to have to figure out how to manage festivals, how to be on podcasts with people that you meet. You're going to have to figure out how to get your book sold in a bookstore. So isolation isn't the writer's greatest skill. Finding silence and time to work is a good skill. It's a great skill. But it's equally important to still find a way to be a part of the world. And I think that's what I advocate for. There's no writer I know that is spared the responsibility of being a citizen in the world. You don't. It's not like you go into that room and you write, and then all the problems go away, and then you come back and you're like, oh, Earth has problems. No, you're still part of this thing. And so that aspect of finding silence amongst the daily struggles of life is hard. That's where like a lot of writers will go astray, not because of lack of talent or lack of skill or lack of drive or ambition, just their circumstances do not allow them that 5 minutes, 5 hours, 5 days, 5 months, maybe 5 years that it takes to just work on a project and get it done. So we're sitting here on a nice sunny day in Windhoek. Imagine what this situation would be like if bombs were dropping on us, if there was gunfire in the streets, if there was no food at home. We'd have a very different, a more challenging way of getting this conversation done. And that's what writers face. Just the hardship of getting to that silent space is challenging. But you have to it falls on every writer to figure out a way to make that space for themselves.
Nice. I've never heard this perspective, like finding silence. It makes a lot more sense, I guess, because I've noticed that with work, let's say, depending on your situation, with work, with school and whatever, you don't have mental real estate to just pause, and kind of convert your experiences into like a body of work or into like writing specifically. So most of the time, I think it's just people have a lot of things to deal with, So it might seem as though writing is a luxury, because it's kind of like you have bills to pay, you have things to address, you don't really have time to like sit down and just write. How do you deal with that for the everyday average person.
So my stance is that there's never been a moment in the world, in the history of the world, where you've just been allowed to do what you want. And that's something I think our current status quo is struggling to deal with. We think there's a moment where in time where you are just allowed to do what you want. And that's never been the case.
The perfect time.
There's never been a perfect time in history. If you go back ancient times, you were thinking about working the fields and whether the rains are going to come. And that occupies all hours of your day. You're plowing, you're tilling, you're sowing, you're harvesting. That's your life. At what point in that farming day are you going to sit down and carve something out of stone or whatever? You're a hunter, you are a warrior, you are all of these things. If you're in ancient Rome or ancient Greek or wherever the heck, you were a gladiator or you were a slave or you were a Roman senator, or if you're in ancient China, you're a soldier or you're a lord or you're a shogun or something. But there's never been a moment in human life where you just wake up and do what you want. Art has always been not only the thing at the end of the day, but the thing that you work towards. I'm gonna finish plowing this field so I can go home and play the banjo or the guitar or whatever. And it is that desire to get to that thing that ultimately makes, I think for me, a good artist, because there's a desire to get to the stage. And once you get to that stage, you're focused, you're driven, you're focusing on that thing just for that moment in time. And when you get to playing that banjo, that guitar, or that wood carving, or that piece of writing, you also bring to that art all the things that you've had to go through the day and the week and those struggles. And your art, in a lot of ways, is a lot better. I don't know whether you've had the luxury of meeting artists who have nothing but time on their hands.
Yeah.
But they are the most boring, vapid people I've ever met.
Yeah, for sure.
Not because struggle is necessary, but I think life is incomplete without something that is purpose-driven. And when you give an artist just the luxury of endless time, they almost don't know what to fill with it. Because art, for me, is the thing that remains not only after all the other struggles of life, but it's the thing that all the struggles of life are also brought to. So I don't have a perfect day in which I know between 5 and 7 or between 5 and 10 o'clock, it's going to be dope and I'm going to sit down and write. No, I have to work very hard to do that. I have to make sure the bills are taken care of, the dogs are fed and walked. I have to make sure the groceries have been done. And when I sit down to write, depending on how well I've addressed those pressures, then I can focus. And I know I've only got 4 hours to do this thing. And so in that 4 hours, I don't have the luxury of wasting 2 hours. I have to focus within 10 minutes and get to the writing and get going. And after 4 hours, leave that 4 hours knowing that I've done the best I could within that time frame, and I need to get back to this space tomorrow or whenever I have 4 hours. So I don't buy into that luxury of like, oh no, I need just, heaven to create art. No, I think that's a luxury that's a deluded luxury that we wouldn't be afforded here in this town, in this city, in this country, in this region of the world, on this earth. And we work around those things to create art. So I think art is the thing that you make in spite of all the things trying to stop you from making the art. Nice. And we have to be serious and realize that there's never going to be a perfect moment, man. There's never going to be. I haven't found 1 week in my life where things are just perfect.
Yeah.
No, I think that's a delusion, and trying to chase that perfection, I think, leads to deep unhappiness because you never find it, but you're expending a lot of labor trying to chase an elusive things. I would rather spend that labor on realizing that these are the challenges that I face. How can I address them so that I can do the thing that I love and want? And then maybe if you're lucky, the thing that you love and whatever could turn around and be the thing that you do more of. Nice. But it's not going to be the thing that you do all the time. Think about all the people we idolize who are playing football, or the so-called people who have achieved and they're doing exactly what they want. They're playing football, they're singing, they're acting. They don't do that most of the time. A football player spends most of their time training or doing commercials. And then the exchange for doing what you've wanted to do for 3 years since you were 4 years old is that you get to do this for a decade and never again. That's a big sacrifice. To know that you can only be a soccer player for 10 years, 15 years if you're lucky. And then what are you going to do afterwards? If you're thinking of like, oh, I want to sing full time, I've met some singers who are at the very top of their game, and singing isn't what they do most of the time. The administration of their careers, the record labels, the contracts, music video shoots, it's publicity, it's touring. And touring isn't the time spent in the stadium. It's the time on the bus or the flight or sitting in transit or waiting for the stage to be set up. That stuff is also part of it's part of the price that you pay. So there's no career that you have that is just perfect and wonderful and whatever. I think, I haven't met one artist who's doing their art full time that hasn't had to pay a price. That price might be hidden from us, but it's being paid somewhere. And even I'd say even the scam artists, the ones who have figured out a way to play the system, who look like artists without actually doing the artwork, is even though they're not paying the price, someone somewhere is paying the price. So for every fake artist, there are 5 real artists who are suffering because that person's figured out how to game the system to bypass all the necessary labor to get to the stage, and they're living the so-called life. But that's gonna come at a price as well. Nothing in this world is given for free, I believe. I'm not saying that it's karmic or that things will balance, but I just have a weird sensation that everyone gets what's coming to them. But I've not met anyone who does what they want all the time. And I think that desire to approach life in that way, I want to just do what I want. It doesn't take into consideration that you're living as part of a community, society, country, nation, earth. Want is just, it's a little bit lazy to say you just want, but what are you adding to the world in order to get this limitless want?
No, but it's I think what most people lack is just perspective, and you paradigm shift, because I most of the time, like you said, what most people try and aim for is like a perfect time, a perfect situation, and most of the struggles they're experiencing now is just in pursuit of that perfect thing. But like you say, you need to come back to reality and understand that there's never going to be a perfect time. The people that achieve the things that they've achieved, they've done it by actually living and actually completing what they actually have to do in order for them to get a little gap of time to do what they want to do.
I mean, take you for example. You have a hustle beyond sitting at this table with me. I know your Saturday is not just chilling. I know you've got something else to do. I know you weren't doing this Monday to Friday, so you have some other hustle that you must attend to. I know you don't have a recording studio. The way people think about, oh, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna buy a mic, I'm gonna buy a camera stand, get a recording studio, design it the way I want, get that podcast couch that everybody seems to have, and then just it's gonna be gravy. So if the price of you getting what you want is waiting for what seems like forever to get there, are you willing to pay that price? How long will it take you to get that couch, to get that studio, to get that thing, to do this podcast or this recording that you want? If I financially put it in front of you and they say it's going to take maybe 7 years, are you willing to wait 7 years for that thing when you can just get a camera, get me here at the Hilton, and we can have a recording session? And I think that reality of it's going to take 7 financial years, X amount of money, X amount of infrastructure to get you to here. I think that's where my frustration comes from with entrepreneurship. It's that when you put things down, when you look for this perfect scenario, you put it in terms and you're like, I have to wait 5 years to get here or to try this or to do that in the way. No, I'd rather get started with what I have and then I'll figure out the rest along the way. I think we cannot wait for a perfect solution. We cannot wait to be in a room with soundproofing, where there's a DJ mixing levels. We cannot wait for a person with a 4K resolution camera and I don't know,
minds,
Adobe Premiere Pro editing
Exactly,
to have a meaningful conversation about something. You have to do what you can with the best of your abilities and then learn along the way and then see where that winds up. And I don't doubt that you could get to that studio.
Yeah.
And once you get to that studio, you'll arrive there at that moment with more information. Definitely. You know what you need and what you don't want. You know what you've paid to get there, so you know what your space is about and what it's not about. There's no frivolous. Once you get to the thing that you've always dreamed about as, I don't know, as a younger version of you, and you've worked hard to get there, and you've paid the price to get there, you're less frivolous about a lot of things. But I also find you can also sometimes be more generous because you know the struggle, so you're more understanding of other people who are coming up. You're more willing to collaborate with peers because you realize it's lonely. What you're doing now is lonely.
It is.
Like, this is lonely. But there'll come a time when you find a like-minded person who's also in the struggle like you. And then you'll be like, oh, we should link up and do that thing together. And then it feels a little less lonely. And then suddenly, before you know it, you have community. And then before you know it, you're Nathan, chairperson of the Namibian Podcasters Association of, you don't know where this thing could go.
For sure.
But definitely the longer you're on the road, so it's like, if you're going to go from here to there, there's going to be a lot of people at the start.
Yeah.
You can replace this with whatever it is. It can be writing, can be photography, can be gym, can be music, can be software design. There's going to be a lot of people at the beginning. As you walk this road, people are going to start taking left turns, right turns. This road is too hard, too harsh, too long, too slow, too boring, too unremunerative. And you're going to reach a stage where you're basically walking this journey alone for a time. And that's when that loneliness, I think, is important. That silence. In that silence is where you're going to do something. You're going to create your work. You're going to write your show. So you're going to create that novel, that movie, that song, whatever the heck. And then that thing that you've done, by sticking that journey of loneliness out long enough, that art, let's call it art, that art that you make will bring people towards the art, because they're like, yo, you know what Nathan's doing? Like, we gotta go check out his theater production, or you gotta go check out his cartoon or whatever. And then that's gonna bring you a community. But you're still on this road.
Yeah.
And on that road, once you do that art, suddenly you'll find there's all of these other people like you who've been on this similar journey. And then that will become your community. And you're like, whoa, so this is, and you've both been on this journey of loneliness without knowing it. You've both been suffering in silence on separate parts of the world, and you're like, shit, I'm the only person doing this, but you're actually not. And then that thing that you make on your journey will be what brings you your community. And you just have to stick that journey out long enough. And you just have to be brave enough and smart enough and determined enough to just get to the thing that you must make, because that will bring you community.
Nice.
I think about that in the context of my novel and how I had to stick. I had to sacrifice so much just to get to the stage where I was writing. I had to sacrifice even more just to get to the manuscript phase. The things I gave up in order to have a book published. And then how that book, when it was published, it was the thing that I could go and say, I'm this writer from Namibia, and you meet all of these other writers who have gone through similar journeys like you, and they recognize you as an equal. They're like, oh, I've been on this road, except mine was 10 years long. I'm on mine, and mine is 15 years long. And I got lucky, and mine was 7.5, but it got chopped in half because I met this person, whatever. But you've all been on this journey. And that brings your community. And that gives you the space and the time. And for me, that's what I feel like is real networking. When the work that you've done brings you similarly like-minded people who are doing the same sort of work, and now you can exchange, like, yo, Nathan, I know you're trying to publish a second book. Have you heard of this new publishing company that's looking for these little types of things? That's when you're like, oh, this is why I went through those years of suffering, because now suddenly people are on the same journey are sharing their own knowledge, as opposed to this typical networking definitions that's thrown around about showing up at events and handing out business cards. But you ask people, what do you do, or what have you done? And they're like, silence, crickets. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah,
True.
to bring this all around, I don't know whether there's ever been a time where you can do what you want.
Mm-hmm.
And when you put it out there, when you say, oh, I want to do what you want, how toddlerish does that sound? Like, that doesn't sound like an adult statement.
Exactly.
I want to do what I want all the time. And I'm like, in this world, with all of us trying to make a living, some of us dying every day from things that we have no control over, with all the problems that we have, with all the responsibilities that we have, to do what you want in perpetuity it's a bit reckless, isn't it? It's a bit selfish.
Yeah. Lack of perspective. Yeah. I want to transition to your work. You know. When I first came across your book, I think your debut novel, The Internal Audience of One, I was shocked at the sort of like widespread of acclamation it received globally and here. In my perspective, I think that was the first time I've sort of seen, I would say, Namibia on the map in terms of literacy. Also, a lot of people I know share the same sort of perspective. And what sort of inspired you to write the story, and what was the message that you wish to convey through that book?
Man, like what inspired me to write that story is, one, that childish frustration of wanting to always have done it. I've always loved books my entire life, and I've always wanted to be on a bookshelf. This is like a pure selfish desire that a child has once you've picked up a book and you're like, I want to do that. You could replace that book with soccer ball and it's the same drive. You could replace it with basketball and it's the same drive. Swimming, singing, software engineering, robotics, whatever it is. For me, it was that thing, to be a writer. And that's the drive that's kept me going. The story itself is a mixture of many desires and many questions that I've always had about migration, about life in this challenging city, in this challenging country, despite all of its gifts, if you want to call it that, because Namibia is a very, it's not the end of the world. This place is like strange, how do you call it, man?
Yeah.
Strange things that are like so good and you like never find them elsewhere. But then they also at the same time are so far from people. Like, this is the only place, no, not the only place, but this is the place that I've lived in, and I know like you can be so close to riches, but so far from wealth.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I've always been interested about like, how do we answer these questions as citizens, as people who live here, as people who must coexist with each other. And that book was born from all of those questions, but also from my own journey through migration, having moved here as a kid, having assimilated to the culture, having taken parts of the country that I love and made them parts of my character, and then also having to deal with the things that I don't like about being in this place, because it's never all gravy. It's never 100% perfect. There's parts of living in Namibia that are unbearable and unpleasant. And so how do you deal with those as a young writer, as a young person trying to find your way in the world? That's where the writing of that novel really came from, all of these questions. How do you get along with friends? How do you manage that very tough time of transition when you're in university? You don't know what you want to become or do later on, but you're very aware that the time you have with these friends in this 4-year, 5-year stage is going to come to an end. And you're all going to be scattered elsewhere. How do you manage that transition from high school to university? And how do you manage your character as a teenager into a young adult, into a mid-20 something? How do you manage your relationship with your family, with your heritage, with this thing that you're becoming, even though you're not aware that you're becoming this thing? Those are like the types of questions that I was really interested in answering that book. And I'm lucky that I got to answer them. And I think I answered them in what I think was a sincere way. Like, the things that I didn't know about remained unanswered. The things that I felt confident about, I tried to address. I don't think I embellished things in the sense that I didn't over-exaggerate conditions too much. So I think it was sincere, and maybe the sincerity is what made the story travel so far and so widely. Because maybe that's why people who are not even Namibians saw themselves in that book, and you're like, oh, this feels like Gaborone. And I'm like, bruh, I've never been to Gabs. What do you mean you see yourself? And they're like, oh, this part and this feeling and this whatever, this scene could be me in Harare. This scene could be me in Nairobi. And you're like, are we all just living the same life, multiple, different kilometers? I like worlds apart. Maybe that's what I felt when I was reading books when I was coming up. I felt like whether something was in Middle Earth or in Roald Dahl's imagined worlds, or whether I was reading like fiction or nonfiction, I always felt like there was some sort of like community or kinship between me and the things that I was reading about. But to be fair, I don't think that is the first book that put Namibia on the map. I think I was lucky in the frame of time that I was, that there was a curiosity about this part of the world, and that's what helped push the book more and more. And then I was very, very lucky that I encountered a lot of writers at like the first set of festivals that I went to, who were generally, and I mean this out of like the goodness of their heart, very supportive and curious about what I was doing and how I was doing and why I was doing. And they were like, oh, back to that journey narrative. It's like, oh, kid, you're here.
Yeah, I'm
here.
Yeah.
And this is what you need to do to get over this hurdle. And then you're like, we'll see you on the other side. And then you get to the other side and all of them are like, see, told you. So it's that kind of thing. And that is what really has helped to push a lot of Namibian writing in since then, with the work that I've been involved in with Doek. It's what's helped to really, really, really bring Namibian writing out of a space of relative unknowingness, where the world doesn't know what we do or how we do. Obscurity, good term. Yeah. Out of obscurity and bring it to the forefront. Bear in mind that things that are obscure are not obscure to the people who live there. So to us, Namibian literature is not obscure to us because we live here, Like Namibian music is not obscure to us because we know Namibia, we live here.
Exactly.
But it is obscure to the so-called mainstream because they're like, where's this country that I've never heard of? What do they do there? So it's obscure to them, but not to us. So when the book and the work that I do reached the so-called mainstream, it almost felt like, but yeah, we're also part of the world, guys. We don't live on Mars. We're also here.
Yeah.
And of course, the things we can produce and make would also be relevant to you guys. I enjoy reading Angolan literature that's been translated into English because we share so much with Angolans. Yeah. And you're always surprised by how much you share, but then at the same time, you're like, oh, but it makes sense. Like, they're just one country up. They're not on Mars. They're not on Pluto. Like, it's not an alien world. It's just a different people who live with a different culture, different set of challenges or problems, and they're also finding their own way to solve them. And for me, that's what I think literature and art in general have always provided for me. And that's what's pushed the work, because people are now realizing that, oh, Namibia's got a thriving arts community, and we need to probably pay attention to what this space is doing.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Definitely. Yeah, quite a bit. And I had this conflict internally with, especially when I was a kid, with the difference between fiction and nonfiction. Yeah, because for me, it was like, I thought fiction was just things that aren't necessarily true. So I was like, if it's just untrue things, I might as well just watch a movie or cartoon or something. And books, like nonfiction books, are actually where the value is. Like, you know exactly, the book says how to so you know exactly what you're going into. But when I started reading nonfiction books, like novels and everything, it's strange how you tend to sort of understand that it could be the same. The line between fiction and nonfiction is very slim. It feels like it's just the medium the author used to say something that could have been said in a nonfiction book, but probably because the title is, you're not sure what you're going to get out of a fiction. Do you when you write a fiction like a novel, do you write it with the intention to convey a message, but you just embellish it in?
Oh man, I think conveying a message is for writers who have reached a stage where they think they can give out messages and like this is what the world is and this is what it should be. I am not at that stage in my career or in my arrogance for that matter. I'm still asking questions and hoping that I'm at the stage in my career where I'm asking questions and I'm hoping I get smart enough so that the questions themselves get smarter and therefore more likely to get an answer. You know, that's what I think I'm doing in my career. But to your question about whether do I decide about fiction and nonfiction, I don't think about it as a choice about I want to put out a nonfiction work or a work of fiction. It's more along the case of like, what is the best way to get this thing in my head to this person on the other side of the table. Let's use you for example. So fiction for me has always been a way to interpret the truth in a condensed manner. So let me put it this way. What happens in the duration of a novel is sometimes what happens in the course of like one person's life, a character in a novel. And how do you get 1,000-year, 100-year, 10 years journey condensed right down? For me, fiction is a great way of doing that in an interesting way. And getting Rémy to follow this kid as he becomes a teenager, as he becomes a man, as he becomes a father, as he becomes a grandfather. You can do that in a very short space of time in a fiction work. And the deal with fiction that you make with the book when you're buying a fiction book is you're buying the book because you know that on the surface this isn't real. But real doesn't mean that it's not true.
Exactly, that's the difference.
Real, that just because they're dragons doesn't mean that when your favorite character dies,
it's not true.
That's not a real death. Like that death is real even if it's like a dragon. And so that's the deal you've made with the book. I know this isn't real, but it doesn't matter because I know it's going to be true. All right? With fiction, with nonfiction, the deal is somewhat reversed. This is true because it is real. Does that make sense?
I see.
And it is true because I, as the writer, have made myself vulnerable, and I'm writing about this thing that happened to me, or that I've seen, or that I've witnessed, or that I've been a part of. Take, for example, a lot of literature that millennials love. Let me track back. A lot of millennial writers will write very, very well about grief or trauma because they've gone through it or they've experienced it. And I'm not saying it's just millennials, everybody writes it, but there's like a particular strain of millennial writers who are very good at this kind of writing. So let's, for example, say you're going to write a book about your mama dying. Now, let me say this and try and understand. Ain't nothing special about your mama dying. Everybody's mama gonna die. People's mothers have died. Since forever. Now, given that your mother dying is just a fact of the universe, how are you going to then write this in a way, why is your mother dying going to be something that not only I want to read about, but that actually adds value to my life? So you've taken this fact, this thing that is real, and now you're looking for the truth within it. And you're like, well, when my mother died, I found this about myself. And I was in this place and I was in this time. And this is what I experienced. And then maybe you find someone whose mother has died and they're struggling with that same thing. But the trick about it's not that your mother died, it's that you experienced death. And that fact is relevant for everybody. So even if my mother hasn't died, maybe my cousin has died, maybe my father's died, maybe my grandfather's died. And your experience that you're writing about is going to be meaningful to me as I navigate this new thing that has just happened to me. And so fiction you understand that it's not real, but but you understand that it's true. And the good fiction books, the ones that everybody keeps passing around, keeps sharing, it's like, yo, you've got to read this book, not because of like the dragons or the witches or the wizards, but because this kid is a teenager, man. And he's trying to like figure out his life. That's why we love superheroes. That's why people love Spider-Man so much. It's not about the spider, the web slings. Like Peter Parker's just like a teenager trying to like survive a day, a week, and get to the date with the girl that he likes. You know, he's trying to... the big things in Peter Parker's life aren't the villains. It's that he can't ever have an honest date with Mary Jane. And it's like, you realize in today's world, we're talking about our relationships and how sincere we are on dates. What are red flags? Like Peter Parker's a walking red flag. Like he's never honest with the person that he likes because of his other life. But somehow he's a superhero.
He keeps secrets to her.
Yeah, he keeps secrets from her, fam. And I'm like, it's a very big secret to have. I feel like if Peter Parker can hide Spider-Man, I should be allowed to hide some things in my past. I feel like that's toxic.
That's what everybody does.
Yeah, it's what everybody does. But you understand that you've made this deal, that you're going to see this person struggle with this thing, knowing that it's not real, but you know it's true. Because you've seen other people who are hiding, who are living separate lives, and how it's hard for them to make them one. With the non-fiction, it's the reverse. And and we have to understand non-fiction is like also a very broad genre. There's so many, or rather not genres, field. There's so many subsets of non-fiction. So the things that I'll read in non-fiction world, things about loss, trauma, about blackness, about masculinity, about sexuality, about power and its relations to us in the world, are not like other things that other writers or readers will produce or enjoy reading. I enjoy reading essays in nonfiction. Essays about life, essays about masculinity, essays about death, essays about blackness. But I don't enjoy reading management sciences. Like, it's just not who I am.
It's too technical.
Like, that's just not... I don't do Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Let me put it that way. And I've got specific reasons why I don't do Rich Dad, Poor Dad type of things. Because for me, it feels like those books are not sincere enough. They promise a formula and follow 1, 2, 3, 48 laws of power, and then bam, you're gonna be at the top of the world. How many people have tried to live those 48 laws of power, and where are they now? You know, so I think there's some dishonesty with some particular aspects of writing because they promise a formula and no one's got that formula. Because you realize if there was only one answer, I could have found it already. Like there's so many smart people who have been thinking about this life thing. We would have found this answer long. If one book had the answer, then only that one book would have been written. But why are we still producing books? Because we know that there's not one answer. There's many ways of seeing the same problem and trying to come up with solutions. So within the non-fiction field, there's also many, many types of non-fiction. And it also has to fall on the reader. There's a big response on the reader to be careful about what they read within any genre. And so I won't say that that non-fiction, all of it is true, all of it is real. Some of it is a lie. Just like some of fiction is like a terrible lie. It's like they've taken the thing and they've turned it towards what it shouldn't be turned towards. And there's this dishonesty is everywhere. It's not just in the arts, it's in finance, it's in tech, it's in mining, it's in farming, where you take the thing, the good of the thing, and you turn it towards some ulterior motive. It's not just the arts. So I think there's just a little bit of critical thinking that needs to come when we engage with any one thing. Not all of it is true. And not all writers are sincere. Not all writers are honest. Not all writers are good. Not all books are good. Not all books are worth it. There are some books that do not deserve the place of prominence that they have in the world. But this is the same for everything in the world. I don't think art is special in that way.
True. You said in quite a lot of panels, as a judge for literally, I'm not sure. I struggle saying the word. Is it literary? Or it's literary. Literary panels for prizes and stuff. where you guys go over people's manuscripts and everything. What sort of qualities do you look for in a story when you're judging?
Man, needs sincerity, man. I'm like, there's a stage when you've been doing something for a long time, like let's say writing, and you pick up a piece of writing, and you just know from the first sentence, this person has been thinking about this for a very long time. You just look at it and you're like, this is something. So I'm using the example of grief or your mom dying because I just read a recent essay by a writer called Rémy Ngamije where it starts, I'm paraphrasing and I could get it wrong, so please forgive me, but it starts something along the line, the year my father died, I learned a new type of laughter. I said, yo.
I like it because it's short, but it says a lot of things.
That's when you're like, this person has not been, this wasn't written yesterday flippantly. No. This has been thinking about this. And when you are judging, or when you're reading a whole lot of submissions, like for the magazine, you get a feeling for someone who's been doing their craft. Wow. Sort of like how a violinist who's been playing the violin for 30 years can know the difference between someone who's playing for 2 months and 2 years.
True.
Reading and writing are pretty much the same. When you've read your whole life, you come across writing when you're like, this is not amateur. This is someone who's working at their craft. I'm looking for sincerity in the sense like, is this story written? Does it have something to offer me other than it being written? Does it make me think about, I didn't think about brother-sister relationships in that way. I didn't think about people living in small towns that way. I did not think about this privilege that I've had all this time. Ask me some question about something in the universe. Is it written in a good style? By good style, I purely just mean within the rules of the language that we're judging it in. Does it use good language in that language? So an English story, if you're writing in English, does your story have good English in it? By good English, what do I mean? Do I mean British English? I literally mean the English from the place where you're from. Does that make sense?
That makes sense.
So when I'm writing my story as a Namibian, I'm not trying to write in British English. I'm writing it in English that I have encountered here. What English have I encountered here? Bear in mind, I'm a private school boy, so I've encountered British English.
Yeah.
So I'm writing in British English. But in that British English, am I writing it to the best degree of that British English and also bringing in all this other English and other language that's around here? So I'll judge my writing on that standard. But that's not the standard upon which I'll judge other writers. Nigerians have their own way of writing.
Yeah.
And they have their own English. Kenyans, Ghanaians, South Africans, Zam, all of these countries have their own way. So within that context, like if you're reading a Zimbabwean story, it's a question like, is this story written in the best way within that region? Bearing in mind that I'm not only reading one Zimbabwean story, I'm reading 15 Zimbabwean stories. So like, wait, but why is this one like this and that one? Then you start seeing different levels of language. Then you start seeing not only, I don't really care about styles, I just care about like the story. I.e., when I read it, am I able to tell Nathan, yo, I just read the story about a kid whose whole mission is to try and get to school. And then you're like, the first question is like, well, does he make it? I'm like, well, let me tell you. Now we've got a story. Whereas you can also read like 300 pages of like, Rémy, what did you say? I'm like, Nate, bro, I don't even know. I don't even know where to start. Like, so it's about, for me, have I read something that I can tell someone else? Because that's the first basis of a story. It's let me tell you a story.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to tell someone else about it. That makes it a story. So for me, that's another thing. I enjoy stories that are heavy, that are sad, that are tragic, that are funny, that are angry, that are romantic, that make me feel fluffy inside. Sometimes all together, sometimes separately. You can't just live on one type of story, just like you don't eat one thing in a regular day, in a day. You have to have a variety of diets. I look for uniqueness. Is this a story that I've heard before? Think about kids on the playground. You know, like how popular was that kid who always had a new story? Even if that story wasn't true.
Yeah.
You know, you always had that kid on the playground who was just full of, just like, there's no way all of this happened in a weekend. But
how did he
the
make
lit,
it? Yeah.
it's lit, bro.
Yeah.
Can you imagine that kid never told the same story twice? That's that's a great storyteller. And so like, sometimes in a story and you're like, oh man, I've read this story before. That's sometimes disappointing in writing, because I feel sometimes like if you want to write, that's where you need to read so that you don't write the same thing twice, to also be aware of what's happening in the world around you. And so I like stories that like, yo, I've never read anything like this. Or sometimes it's harder, or I've heard the story, but it's being told in a new way. And there's new characters and there's a new angle to it. That's a lot harder to do.
Yeah.
But I look for originality or uniqueness. I enjoy a story that's written with good language. I like reading stories that I have not encountered. So I'm always interested in stories from countries that you don't hear about. Central African Republic, Benin, Togo, Mauritania, Mauritius. Bear in mind, remember what I said. These things are obscure to me, but they're not obscure to the people within that community. So I enjoy reading those obscure narratives from these obscure countries or these obscure literary traditions, because I'm like, whoa, I have not encountered this before. And then seeing what they write about. And sometimes just wild and it's new and it's different, but sometimes like, who would have known Mauritians are struggling with the same thing or struggling with here in Windhoek? And that's like kinship.
Yeah.
It's like, we're all part of the same struggle, same part of the same power structures, all trying to live our life with dignity, all trying to make it to another day, man. And that for me is like, when you find a good story that makes you feel like you're part of the world. That's what I think I'm looking for in stories. Stories that make you feel like you're part of the world. Yeah.
Nice. I ask this because I have a lot of friends or people I know that write, and I divide the writing journey of a person in 2 steps, because there's the first step, which is the first phase, which is the writing phase, where you write everything that you do, and it's the second phase, which is the publishing phase, where you bring it out to the world. But most times there's either the people that would be actually really good writers, they would write, but when it comes to the publishing phase, they feel as though their work is not good enough. And there's some of them that I wouldn't necessarily say it's not good enough, but they're so excited to just put it out there, So like you said, I think what I took away from what you said is, if it's honest, if it's a story that you can't help but just take it out, you can feel the sincerity in the story, that it's not just a story that you went on Google, what's the best stories to write, and then you just write according to that. The publishing phase is a little bit, obscure to most writers. How would you summarize that for like an aspiring writer?
Publishing is messy, man. Publishing is messy, and publishing is competitive, and publishing is tough, and it has to be tough. And I think a lot of writers don't understand what they're asking when they want their book published. So this is what actually publishing is like. What you are asking a publisher to do is put up their own money to print your book in the hopes that it will sell.
Okay.
So here's an example. You write a story and you come to me and you say, Rémy, I want this book published. And I say, Nathan, it's going to cost me $1 million to put this book out. Can you guarantee that this book will sell and will recuperate my money back? That's the monetary question. That's the business that publishers are in. Recuperating the investment made on a story. That's not sentiment. That's not la-di-da. That's numbers. Nathan, it's going to cost me $250,000 to print this book, 500 copies of this book. Do you think your work is worth this investment? Now, the onus is on the writer to make sure that they've put out a work that justifies that risk. To take money out of my pocket to put in your work without certainty that it'll make me $250K back. That's a very big ask. So you got to ask yourself, the work that you've done, the story that you've written, the manuscript that you produced, you're asking me to dive 200. I don't have $250K, but if I had it, is this the thing that I want to put it in? So that's what you're asking a publisher to do. So for me, I've always been on this. Once I figured that out, I was like, oh, I'm playing with other people's money. And I'm asking them to front me money in order to make money off this work. And once I understood that, I reached the stage where I have to write in a way that my writing is not questioned. Like when I produce a manuscript, I don't want to be asked questions of will this sell? This is not a question I want to be asked. I want to reach a stage where I'm like, Nathan, here's my third book. And you're like, oh no, Rémy doesn't play games. I know he's done the work. This will definitely sell. He's got the market, he's got an audience, he's got a style that I know. If we put 250K in, we will, as a bare minimum, get 245 back. Then we gotta shugusha and hustle the rest back and make profit of this thing. But that's what you're asking a publisher to do. So as long as you understand the publisher's interest, it'll also help define your relation towards your writing. That'll also explain why there's so few publishers. Who's got 250K, million, 2 million, 3 million just lying around? That's why there's so few. That's why there's so few on the continent. And then it's expensive. You're talking about distribution as well. Once we print these books, how are we going to get them get them out? It's a whole other world. Writing and publishing are two different industries. And once you transition, you become a published writer and you become aware of what the costs are. Not only does it change the relation to your writing, but it also changes your relation to the industry. Because the things that get published are the things that publishers think will sell. Not necessarily what is good, not necessarily what the world needs. It's what will sell. And so if you're lucky, and I do not discredit the importance of luck in this game, if you're lucky, what you write is what the publisher believes will sell and hopefully what will sell. But sometimes you're unlucky and the publishers don't think it'll sell because they don't know how to sell this book. They don't know how to market it. They don't know where they can find an audience for it. And that's a reflection on them and the industry and not necessarily on your writing. I know books that have been rejected for 10 years, gone without a publisher for 10 years, and then in year 11, somebody picks up and like, I know how to sell this book. And then suddenly, this book that was unsellable for 10 years is the biggest thing that's there. There's a lot of luck that is involved in this. There's a lot of serendipity where you meet the right editor or the right agent or the right publisher at the right time. But there's also a lot of strategy. So why would I go why would I try to get published by a publisher in LA who's never heard of Namibia? I think you're better off strategically finding a local publisher, getting your work out, and then using them like, hey, you see, it's not just Windhoek, it's just not just Namibia, it's also South Africa, Zim, Zam, Bots, Gab, Eswatini, Moz. Now you've got a region. Now you can approach a continental publisher and say, look, I've got an audience here. I think this will be marketable to a wider audience. Now suddenly East and West Africa, North Africa come into play. And then based on the strength of that, you'd be like, yo, I think this thing can sell across the water. I'm not saying that is a surefire way, but remember that journey?
Yeah.
These are things that you figure out along that way. You've got to start walking the journey to figure out how the heck to walk the rest of the way. Publishing is tricky. Publishing is expensive. Publishing is discriminatory. Publishing is sometimes narrow-minded. The things that the world needs are sometimes not what the industry is doing, but that's the world. Sometimes what the world needs is not what the industries are producing. It's not what the politicians are doing. Publishing is no different. Sometimes publishing is slow. You have to be patient in this game. It might happen now or it might happen later. It might be 56, but you're 32 now. Are you willing to
patience?
Are you willing to ride this wave out? We don't know. Could be now, could be never. It's a gamble.
Yeah.
That's what you are. That's what publishing. Writing is free. You can go right now, pick up Microsoft Word, write your heart out. Publishing, you're taking part in an industry. And as long as you're in an industry, that industry has got rules, it's got cloaks and daggers, it's Game of Thrones shit, it's cutthroat. an industry has its own way of being.
Yeah.
And as long as and once you start participating in that, then you figure out, oh, this is what's happening behind closed doors. This is why I get paid less money than Nathan in his advance. Nathan might get a $500,000 US advance. $500 in your pocket, bro, for a book. It's a lot of money. But Rémy only gets 10K. I could be angry and say, like, why is Nathan getting 500 and I'm getting 10K? It's like, well, Nathan sells his books, bro. He's out there on the circuit making sure that his print run sells out. And whereas I've published a book and now I'm too fancy to be seen promoting my work because I'm just like la-di-da. I'm like highbrow. I'm like, no, selling is like, it's dirty. Ew. No, well, I will continue giving Nathan 500K because Nathan sells out his 500K. Whereas I gave you 10K and you didn't sell 100. Why am I motivated to give you 100,000? Again, this is my money, not yours.
Yeah.
And so I think that is tricky. But then there's also other things that go into publishing. The fact that African literature, African writing is devalued, that its true value is not realized. And so it's a lot harder to publish from here, from Namibia, from SADC, from Africa as a continent. It's very hard to get your work out. It's competitive. There are not enough publishers, and there are too many writers and not enough publishers. And once you understand the statistical game behind this, you're like, yo, the most you can do as a writer is control your writing, improve your skill, and then hopefully luck will find you. I'm not saying that it's impossible to publish, but I'm just saying it's challenges. I know where the luck is in my life.
Yeah.
I am very aware of where the luck is. I know what is skill, what is talent, what is drive, what is determination. But Nathan, I'll be honest, I know where the luck is.
Yeah.
I know how I got lucky. And I'm not ashamed to say like, oh no, that one was, this thing happened here, that's lucky.
Yeah.
But again, luck is also the thing that happens when you stay on this road long enough. Things, after going through your own dramas.
You say, luck favors the prepared. So you
those things are true. Those things are true. And then also, what else? How do you know when you're ready to shop your manuscript around? I think that's a subjective thing. You have to be comfortable in your own skill and your own craft and know and be able to gauge where you are in your writing, because no one has time to read your work for you. As a writer, you have to really put in the work yourself. The information is out there, but you have to put in the work yourself. No one's going to do it for you. I can't do it for you because I'm busy with my own work.
Yeah.
You know, every writers are such busy and stressed people. The ones who do publish are like very, very lucky, man. Like for every one published writer, there's like maybe 1,000 or 1,000,000 rejected ones. It's really, and it's not just skill and it's not just hard work. It's timing. It's luck. There's a lot of luck that's involved in this industry. I don't wanna speak too much about it because I'm not the most knowledgeable about publishing. I know the general aspects of it, but
it's difficult.
Think about how many actors there are in the world. How many of them get big roles?
Yep.
You can go act in front of your mirror right now. You can go act in your shower, put a whole script together. But how many actors get a call back? How many footballers do you know? Just here in your hood, how many people play football in your hood? How many of them don't think Manchester City, Barcelona levels. How many of them got the call back for the regional team? Nathan, that's what this game is like. That's what any industry is like. When you're trying to get your work out or your game out, it's tough. People are saying, I want to go to Manchester City. Bro, first make Commerce regional team. And when you ask yourself, why didn't I make the Commerce regional basketball team? I was a basketball player. When I think about it, I'm like, oh no, I need to practice twice a day. Man, I've got chemistry homework. Like, I've got physics. I need to go home and pass this stuff. I don't have time to be bouncing a ball 8 hours of the day. And that's why you didn't make the Commerce regional team. Because there was somebody who was doing it 8 hours a day. Why didn't you make the national basketball team? from the regional team? Oh, because there was somebody who was bouncing this ball 12 hours a day. Why didn't you go to the NBA? Because there's someone who's been bouncing this ball since they were 3.
Yeah. Different levels.
Yeah, so it's those levels that you also have that are evident in the publishing world. Why didn't I get this kind of deal? Because I was this age, because I'm black, because I'm from this part of the world. Whereas if you're in New York or you're in LA, you're in London, things are different. And then also, why didn't you do this at this point? I don't have those connections. I'm on this part of the world. Why didn't this happen for you here and there? It's not my path. It's not my journey. And the things that have happened are the things that have happened to me on my journey. Can't be angry about what happened to other people on their things, on their part of the world. They've also had their own challenges. I don't want to trade mine for theirs, but yeah, no, writing, publishing is a whole messy game, bro.
Yeah. Well, I like the analogy you draw, about, first you start off and then you go to the lonely phase.
Yeah.
And you meet people that do the things you do, and then you reach the highest echelon of the mountaintop. It would be cool if you would put it in like a painting or something, just so you could have it there where you look at it.
Oh man, I wish
really cool.
I wish it was all so clear. And the thing is, you never know where you are in the journey.
Yeah.
Until you arrive, and then you'll be like, oh, that phase is over. And then you don't know where you are until you arrive, and then you're like, oh, that phase is over.
Yeah.
But that's how I think about it, man. I don't know whether it holds true for everybody. If you speak to another writer, you will have a different take. If you speak to somebody else, they'll have a different view of something. I don't claim to have all the answers. I can only share the information that I've encountered on this journey. And I'm still on it, bro. Like, I don't think I've arrived at the end. Now I'm at a different phase of my journey. People might look at it and say, yeah, but now you're at the top. Now you've done that. And, well, maybe it might look like that from the outside, but I have my own particular journey and my own particular standards that I want to meet. I have my own goals. Or rather, I climbed this mountain and I thought this was the mountain that I wanted to climb. And then I got up and then I saw, that's the one I'm actually headed to.
Yeah.
And that's life. That's it's never the one thing or the other.
Yeah.
It's complex, it's messy, it's dirty, but it's also beautiful and rewarding in its own way.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what we call entrepreneurship. Maybe that's what we call business. Maybe that's what we call art. I don't know. I just know, bro, I wake up frustrated and I try to deal with that frustration in my own way.
Yeah. One day at a time.
One day at a time. Yeah. What is it? If you do the one day, you gotta do the other. Yeah. That's from The Wire. Yeah. One of my favorite series.
That's a crazy series.
Yeah. If you do the one day, you gotta do the other.
You gotta do the other.
And then, a day at a time, man.
Yeah.
The hard part is just having the courage to take it a day at a time. I don't want to sell it to the public that I've got things figured out. Sometimes I'm scared about tomorrow. A lot of the times I'm anxious about tomorrow. But it's not about being crippled by, say, fear or anxiety. It's just, you got to approach it with some courage, some dignity, some honor, and then try and hope for the best. You dollar what you must, bro. You dollar what you must. Exactly. And then this portion, you just also be like, hey, I can't do.
Yeah.
Bro, like, look at us. We're here doing our hustles, whatever our hustles are. It's not raining. What are we going to do about this job?
Do what you have to do.
I've saved my water. I've stopped watering my plants so much. Shower instead of bath. But what else besides this to make? What are we going to do about it? So that's what I mean by like dollar what you must. Mm-hmm. You go home, write your story. Do what you must. Learn the tricks of writing. Learn the rules of writing so that you can break them. Learn what is good English so that you can change it. Learn what is a good story so you can bring your own thing to it. Write the story. Write the first chapter. Write the second. Finish the damn manuscript. Once you have a manuscript, once you have that thing that you say that you're going to do, then you can approach a publisher. dollar what you must. This is what you must dollar. This writing thing. The publisher, if they like what you've dollared, then they'll be like, hey, mate, boy, this one we're going to publish tomorrow, a year from now, whatever.
Yeah.
But you've got to take care of what you must take care of as an artist. The onus of producing art has always been on the artist, not on the audience. So if I don't like what you're singing, I don't owe you anything. It's on you to sing something that I want to hear, not even necessarily want. Get rid of that want. You need to reach the stage where what you're singing, I need to hear. And I have no choice but to listen and be like, that onus, bro, that's on you. I have no responsibility towards you as the audience. I've got struggles in my life. I've got to put food on the table and you want me to listen to you sing. What you sing better change my day, bro, because I've got this other stuff in my life. So the onus is on you as the artist. The pressure is on you. The responsibility is on you as the artist. Which is why I can sincerely say I don't think I waste people's time with my writing. When I say I want you to read this story, it's because I think it's important. And it's because I spent time on it. And I spent a lot of things trying to get it done. And so I don't think my writing is frivolous. And we need to avoid frivolous shit. Frivolous shit will get us killed, bro. Yeah. But that's in a nutshell what I think about.
Nice. Wow. If someone stopped you, in conclusion, if someone stopped you in an elevator, sort of like an inspiring writer, an artist, or creator, an entrepreneur, and they ask you for advice, what would you...
Start, and then you'll see whether this thing is for you. You want to play you want to do boxing? Start. Let's go to a gym now. Let's wrap it up. Let's throw, catch some hands, 1, 2, whatever. See if this is for you. If you like that feeling, then come back tomorrow and still see if this is for you. You want to run a marathon? Run the marathon. Start. See if this is for you.
Yeah.
Because you might not have everything, but you'll figure everything out along the way. You can't wait for perfect moments. Start, because I guarantee you, people have tried to get me into running. I have run. I said, guys, I hate this. This is miserable. This is not for me. And I know it's not for me because I've started. I'm like, hey, where's the train? Where's the taxi? Because I need to go back home. Because I'm like, running is not for me. But there's other things that are for me. And you have to start to figure out whether this thing that you think that you want is for you. So just start. Because as soon as you start, the lungs, there's a stage where your lungs feel like they're about to burst and you're going to cough up blood.
Yeah.
That stage, if you like that stage, if you make it through that stage, come back tomorrow and then maybe this is for you. But you can't like things in the abstract. You can't love someone in your head. You got to love them in real life. So if you really want this person, step up, do the things that it takes. If you want to start this business, you can't wait for the perfect conditions. Start it and see if you really if you're about this grind. You want to do this piece of music? Okay. Pick up it. Do you have a guitar? No, you don't have a guitar. Well, but you want to be a guitarist. Well, what do you have to do to be a guitarist? You got to get a guitar. You need money to get a guitar. What are you willing to get the money to buy the guitar? Because you want to be an artist. Are you willing to wash dishes, sweep streets? Willing to pick up gum off the underside of park benches to make money to buy the guitar? Start. And then immediately the hurdles and the challenges will weed out. Remember what I said at the beginning. At the start, there's many of us.
Yeah.
100 meters from the starting line, the pool's already changed. It's triangular. There's people already panting. They're just like, nah, bro. How long is this? How long are we running for? A marathon. A marathon is a long time in a man's life, bro. Oh, it's too long. I ain't trying to run this marathon. Yeah. And then people start. And that's the start weeds out half. I'm not lying. The start weeds out half the playing field. And then it's half, all the way. Every day someone's being chopped, someone's dropping out, that's life. Yeah. Nice. Just start and see if this is for you. Because if you start and you like it, then maybe you'll continue. Maybe. And if you continue, if you have that relentless drive every day, one word at a time, a sentence, paragraph, one push-up at a time, 1 kilometer at a time, then maybe you'll finish. And once you get to the finish, only then can you be like, oh, that's what this was about. You know, I like thinking about, like, you know, this marathon on Eliud Kipchoge, the Kenyan guy who I just look at this man running and I'm like, how, not even how did you find out you were good at this? It's like, there's a point where he found out he was good at it, but then you're like, good isn't good enough. And you're like, you just carried on just running. Like, bro, do you know how long a marathon is? And this man can run it in 2 hours.
Shit.
I'm like, 2 hours. I don't know anything I can do for 2 hours without a break. Even play PlayStation, bro. I gotta take a break. But running without a break for 2 hours. Nah, man, that's just, it's ridiculous when you think about what this man has done to reach that level of excellence. And no matter what he says, this man, no matter he says you must train this, you must eat that, you must whatever, when that alarm goes off at 3:30 in the morning, and this is when training starts. Is this what you're about? You want to be a boxer. Have you been hit before? First get hit and then find out whether this is for you. Yeah. You want to be an artist? First try and see if you can afford paint. And then see if this is for you. You want to be a photographer? Can you afford a camera? And then, maybe you can afford a camera. Let's see you take a good picture. A picture that evokes an emotion in somebody else. Just start and you'll see if this is for you. Yeah. And then if it's bitter, you can spit it out and stop. But if you are willing to keep chewing, eventually it might become sweet. And that's the thing. It's like, it's bitter at the start. But then you just have to, what's that phrase I like so much? Fork forth. Just, hey. And then you'll see. Yeah. That is always people will always come to you. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it's, it's sometimes at some level, it's just chit chatter. I'm like, just start. Yeah, just start. And then we'll see. You want to open a cafe? Just start. Yeah. What does it take to open a cafe? I don't know. But if you start, you'll figure it out. You want to start a tech, whatever. I don't know what it takes to start a tech, whatever. But start, and then you'll see what you need and whether it's possible and whether you're willing. If it's not possible, you'll find out whether you want to make it possible. Just start. There's a lot of power in the start. There's a lot of things that I've started and I'm like, this is not for me. And you just put it down and you're like. So in an elevator, if someone's passing and they say, I want to write, I want to do film, I want to do this, I want to start a business, start. Nice.
Rémy, this was awesome. I like the way you think. I'm sure that's why your writing is so concise and so, it's deep in some sense. Because you really go deep into the meaning of things, so to speak. And I think I'll put links to your website. I think it has everything that RemyTheQuill.com.
From there you'll be able to find Instagram, Twitter, everything.
I see you working on something new, Only Stars Know the...
I've got a new book coming out in December called Only Stars Know the Meaning of Space. It's a collection of short stories that are presented as a mixtape. So if you read the A side, you get one story. If you read the B side, you get another story. If you read A, B, A, B, A, B, another story. If you read B, A, B, A, different. If you start at the end and go towards the front, you wind up at a different place. But all of them are, I love that short story collection. I'm so excited about it because I was anxious that it would never see the light of day in the way that I wanted it. Because remember what I told you about the journey, there was a time where I thought, man, this thing's never going to get published. And then I sent it out to my agent and we sat with our publisher and she was like, oh, is this what you do? And I'm like, I'm glad you get it. Yeah, but it's also born of struggle, a lot of stress, a lot of hours. And it's coming out 3rd of December and I'm excited about it. A lot of the stories will take place in Windhoek. And so if you're from Namibia, from SADC, if you're if you're a reader, because a reader doesn't belong to any one country.
Yeah.
If you're a reader, there's something in for you. And I think it's funny, but I also think it's sad. But it's funny, sad, sad, funny. I don't know which one it is, but you'll laugh and then you'll think. And then you won't laugh. And then you'll be like, wait. Yeah. That for me is like one of the things I like about this new book that's coming out. Even when I read it, I'm still like, yo, that's heavy. I still don't know how some of those things got to the page, but I don't know. Just that. Yeah. So I'm excited about Only Stars Know the Meaning of Space. It'll be available on the 3rd of December.
Yep.
And yeah, maybe we'll have a conversation about it when it comes out. Because there's a lot of things in there that are relevant to our community. Not necessarily us as people here, but let's say us in our age group, in our demographics, with the challenges that we face. There's love, there's romance, there's loss, there's joy, there's like serious moments of joy, there's serious moments of introspection. And it's all of these things that I've always wanted to experiment with in this way. And I'm so glad, and I'm so privileged, and I'm so lucky. Remember, lucky.
Yeah.
Luck. I'm so lucky to have it on the page and to have a publisher that believes in my work and who is always, always keen to like work with me. That's I can't discredit luck, man. Am I skilled? Yes. Am I talented? Yes. Have I worked hard? Yes. Rémy, are you lucky? Like, damn fucking straight.
Yeah. Rémy, thanks a million.
It's a pleasure, bro.
Cheers.